Welcome, Yannick.
Thank you, Brinsley. It's an honor to be here. Looking crisp.
Sorry?
Looking crisp. I like your setup and the colors in the back, and well lit. I think it does make a difference.
It does. Yeah, thank you. I was just commenting on your background because you've got a new pad, right?
Yes, indeed. It feels like I can breathe on another level. I always had this image of like having a big desk, and I never had space for a big desk. And now having moved to Berlin, where everything's a bit bigger, not quite America big, but there's space, and it's nice to, have the chairs in the back again. And during the pandemic, I had to retire them. Having a little baby, that changed a lot for me. But it's nice to be back in a space that is, dedicated to work, where I have all of my things set up.
But yeah, let's get into it. I've got so many questions I want to ask you. We should probably do a bit of an intro first, and then we can kind of dive into it. But today we're going to look at your, personal and professional journey to building a coaching business. And a lot's changed since we last saw each other. Like you say, you're a dad now, you've moved to Berlin. I'm interested to find out what else is new. But before we dive into all of that, I'd love to hear a little bit of an intro from you about, a professional context first. Who are you as a coach, and what's the makeup of your coaching business?
Yeah, right. So it's a big question. Partly because I know we talk about niching a lot in coaching, and I always found that very limiting, and I know a lot of people will resonate with that. So where I'm at the moment is depending on who I'm talking to. If you ask me for a blanket statement, I'm an existential coach. I'm a positive psychologist. I'm a coach trainer. I'm a supervisor. I love helping people think, right? I love helping people navigate the big questions in their lives or their careers. That's informed by existential philosophy and by positive psychology. So big questions around what makes a good life? What makes me happy? How can I live well? Why the hell am I here for? What am I going to do with the time that I have, in this human form, whatever you believe comes after? How do I make sense? Who am I? Who you are is how you coach, is what I often say. So who you are is how you live, how you do anything, really. So big questions are always underneath the surface of what people bring into the coaching room, what people ask themselves. Can seem like a mundane question about next steps, something very concrete and tangible. But underneath, there's something bigger. So if someone asks me, what do you do? And I say I'm an existential coach or I'm a positive psychologist, it's always going to go into a conversation, almost always. Very rarely people say, cool. I'm an accountant or I do this. And then, they change the topic. It's usually like, that's interesting. Well, what's that? And that's really what you want as a coach. So do I have an elevator pitch? Yes. But really, it's about opening the door into a conversation. And that's what I'm trying to do. And most of my clients, they don't come from Google AdWords, right? I haven't done any advertising. They come through conversations, opening doors into conversations. And whether that's a book or social media or a conversation in the pub, as long as you open doors and you're being curious, that's how you open up spaces for interesting things to happen. And you may or may not invite people into a coaching conversation based on that. But yes, that's me, helping people think. I love to create spaces. I love to help people not regret their life choices. It's difficult for me when you have someone in the coaching room and they said, I wish 20 years ago I would have had the courage to do this or to not do this. So I like the examined life. I like giving people a space where they can ponder, reflect, pause, take a step back. Look at what am I doing here and how am I doing things and what do I actually want and who am I?
Interesting to hear you talk about that. And as I heard you say existential coach, I think you started reeling off some of the big existential questions that might be asked in that topic. Was there anything else you'd add to that? Where if someone said, well, what does existential coach mean in a nutshell? I know it's a vast topic.
Yeah, it takes a little while to wrap your head around what it is in a nutshell. And if you ask, 100 existential coaches, you get 100 different answers. But for me, in a nutshell, it's a philosophy of human lived experience, right? What does it mean to be human? So that's the philosophy. Big questions around existence. What does it mean to be human here in the world with other people? there's stuff that's happening for everybody, So unless we distract ourselves or we stop existing, we all share these existential givens. And they matter. And they matter every time I coach someone. So in a nutshell, it's big questions around human existence and living that help us understand our coachees better, helps us understand ourselves better, and also try to find your own answers to some of these big questions, because there isn't one that you can just take and follow. Existentialists encourage us to create our own realities, our own lives, because we need to choose. We choose our reality very often. So courageous living, very much aligned with Animas in spirit. That's why I connected with Nick so much, because, in spirit, Animas is quite existential as a school.
Yeah, for sure. I guess Nick would describe himself as an existential coach as well, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you need to ask himself. He's certainly an existentialist in my books.
Well, yeah, that's what he shared with me at times. And I would say Animas definitely has an existential lens in the way it approaches training and developing coaches. Interesting to hear you talk about it, though. Something I don't want to unpack the theory too much, because we're going to be talking about your business building journey, but something that I'm always in a question around is there a big distinction for you between ontological coaching and existential coaching, or do you see a big overlap? And by ontological coaching, you might be able to correct me, but I see that as the theory of being, and existential coaching, the theory of existing. But it feels like there's a lot of overlap there. And what type of being is a human being? And what does it mean to live a good life? Do you find yourself using those types of lenses as well?
Yeah, so let's just say ontological, in the word ontology is, what we know about being, as in epistemology. How do we know things? So it has a lot of overlap. Existential is a bit more specific because it goes into the nature of existence and the kind of anxieties and inner conflicts and dilemmas that we carry around as a result of that. So existentialists have gone into a specific direction. Ontological coaching really focuses on the experience of being. And I think at this point, to go more into detail, we could nerd out about it, but I feel it would be a bit distracting. But to keep it simple, yes, they have a lot in common. There's a big overlap, but they have developed in slightly different directions.
Okay, well, let's put a nerd out session in the diary, because I'm curious to pick your brains a bit more about that. Thank you.
I do have a podcast. My very first ever framed as a podcast was with Abudi Shabi, who's an ontological coach. So might be interesting to dig into that.
I'll check it out. Thank you. And on the topic of podcasts, I heard what you do as a coach, and I kind of know you to do quite a lot of things. Like you said, you're a trainer. You used to deliver the MSc at East London in positive psychology, if I'm right. You used to deliver the Existential Coaching and Positive Psychology CPD for Animas.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot developed. When you asked me, I focused on what I do with coaching clients, what do I do for coaches. But yes, that's how I got into teaching. I was at the University of East London. I did my master's in positive psychology there, applied positive psychology. Then I did a master's in existential coaching, little kind of hiatus from UEL. And then I got invited back for a teaching position. And then I found myself running the master's in coaching psychology. Right at the start of a new master's that combined coaching psychology and positive psychology. So I was teaching on the new MSc, Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology, and that was really interesting, bringing together two different disciplines, right? Not so different, certainly related, certainly prone to being married up and integrated. But that was fascinating. So I was teaching there, and I was teaching quite a lot because it was a 3 days a week job, which helped me to build my coaching practice on the side a lot because, I had rent covered, which is nice. Universities don't pay much, but I loved the work because I love teaching, right? So from that, I started a bunch of other teaching jobs. I started supervising. I started running my own trainings. We created the coaching lab that I run once a month, so you can see people coach in action, be a fly on the wall. And from that, a lot of different things developed, right? A lot of different teaching, speaking opportunities. I've always loved talking about coaching. So at some point when people wanted to pick my brain for a bit, I just asked them if it's okay to press record on it and possibly, publish it as an episode of the podcast. No particular concept. It's just two people talking about coaching, or maybe more people talking about coaching. So that's where the Talking About Coaching podcast started. It's just hit record on some interesting conversations and decide whether you want to publish them or not. So, and then Animas asked me last year to take over the podcast, the Coaching Uncaged podcast. And that just gives you access to so many cool people, and really have in-depth conversations about various different topics. And what can I say? I love talking about coaching. I love creating spaces for people to think. So coaching, training, mediation, supervision, running events, all of that is along the same lines of creating spaces, putting some stuff out, getting people to think, to talk, because we do grow through conversations. Every coach knows that. So I really enjoy hanging out with coaches. What can I say? They're, really cool people usually. And that's what I've been enjoying and kind of streamlining a little bit more.
It really comes through in your output. I really enjoy your podcasts, the ones I've listened to with Animas. And of course, you've got this other podcast talking about coaching, and there's a podcast you have around psychedelics and coaching. And then there's the free peer support group that you run alongside the coaching lab, where you get guests to coach for attendees. There's a lot of stuff you're doing. There's a lot. I'm really interested in how you find the time to create all this output. But by the sounds of it, it's a pure passion of yours, creating these spaces, these thinking environments, if you like.
Yeah, I think we do our best work when we do things that we like doing, right? And sometimes it's easier said than done. But I was fortunate enough that, I could create these things and just follow my nose. I had parents who were supporting what I wanted to do. I'm sure they sat down and had a little panic moment when I said, "Oh, I want to study happiness." Coaching, that probably hadn't really heard of that. So, but they were always supportive in me doing what my heart beats for, and I had a trust that this will work out, and it did. Right. And sometimes it was difficult, sometimes, but God, especially when you get your business going. There was a time when I didn't have the job at university, and I was a coach. I was a trained coach, but I had no idea how to run a business. I didn't even like running a business. I didn't want to be a business person. I had my own kind of narrative of what that means. And so I had to work through some of my own stuff. I didn't like sales at all. I didn't want to do any of the admin. I just wanted to do the cool things. So over time, it was really interesting to kind of figure myself out, create some new narratives, come to terms with what money means to me and what selling means to me and what running a business means to me. But then I still, to this day, like to do what I feel called to do. And I think that's where we do our best work, right? So following my intuition, creating exciting things. I had to reel that back because, I've mentioned I have a little baby now. She turns 1 next week. And time has become a lot more scarce as a resource. So I did have to focus more. So, some of the work that I'm really excited about, I kind of had to put on the back burner a little bit, park it for now, so that I can really focus on, a lot of my work is focused on helping other coaches be the best coaches they can be. But it was always super important to me that I have a good number of clients that are coaching clients that have nothing to do with the coaching industry. So I love work with leaders, but, I could focus a lot of work in organizations and really create leadership work. And I decided I'm not going to actively pursue that for now. It happens. And when it happens, I say yes to it because I love the work. But it's like, I had to be more focused. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to do the next couple of months? There's a team of 4 now who do regular work, even if it's just 10 hours a week. But there's a team, and it really feels bigger than myself now. For, the first decade of my coaching, it was Yannick. It was a one-man operation, and I decided where to go and how fast to go. And that's changed now. So that's really interesting. I'm able to do so many things still because I started delegating, because I went through a couple of instances where I got burned with VAs and it didn't work, or, they just disappeared, or they just refuse to do any thinking on their own. But like, yeah, you go through the motions, and now I have people I can delegate to. That's why we're able to run that many events and podcasts and put that much out there. And really, we've just started, right? Because the last year we spent putting systems in place so that we can actually scale a little bit more. And I really didn't like putting systems in place, but they were necessary. So now for 2023, we can actually produce a lot more outward-facing stuff. But yeah, it's been a journey to go from, okay, I just like, what do we do with a podcast? Let's keep it as simple as possible. Let's just press record. Let's just publish it on YouTube. No intro, no outro, no production cost, barely a cover image. I did something on Fiverr, but like, yeah, I go with what I'm called for. And then when I have to adjust, because I'm working too many hours, I'll adjust. And learning how to say no to things was an essential part of that development.
Very interesting answer. A lot there. Really interesting to hear about you talking about the changes in time and also building a team. And that was something I was interested in because I was aware you've got a team now. I noticed in an email you mentioned something. I was like, oh, so you've got a team now. Interesting. And like you say, that's developed this space for you to create this output, even though you're a new dad now. Mm-hmm. Really interesting to hear about your journey. And I kind of want to focus on that. But whilst we're here, I'd love to just unpack a little bit more about the here and now and where you're at. Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about your relationship with Animas for anyone that's listening, because you're a trainer on the ICCS and you've delivered courses. Just briefly give us a little bit of flavor around that.
Yeah, sure. So initially I connected with Animas because I came out of my existential coaching masters, and I wanted to look for other people who are existential coaches. Long story short, I just typed existential coaching into Twitter and found a tweet of Nick Bolton who said, on my way to train existential coaches. So we got chatting, turned out we have a lot in common, and then we connected. And at the time, he really wanted to focus a lot more on the business and step away from the training. So he offered me to take over the existential coaching course when we were running weekends. So I developed that, and I developed a positive psychology course for Animas. And so we were training that for a little while. So I was always there in the vicinity of Animas. Never full-time employed or part-time employed, but always kind of with one foot in the family. That's why I feel very connected to, the spirit and what it is. So over time, I've run trainings. The ICCS, the International Center for Coaching Supervision, is a fantastic operation. Really, really good cohorts, really good course, really enjoyable to teach it as well, because there's so many experienced coaches who take the next level. And then obviously the podcast is very connected, and I'm always scheming with Nick on this or that project and see what else we might develop in the spirit of that kind of coaching.
And why is supervision so important to you, or training it? Why have you landed in that zone?
Yeah, that one was really organic, because when I took over the program leadership and started teaching a lot of coaches, that was in person, and there was always someone in the break or after the lecture day or before or in office hours who would come in and say, hey, I have this issue with a client, or I'm not quite sure what to do. I had this request, or, there was a difficult situation. I'm not sure if it's okay to still coach them. They might need a therapist. So there was a lot of spaces that were organic, where coaches kind of put something on the floor and wanted to discuss it. And given that my coaching head comes quite natural, I would ask them to explore rather than, give them advice or, tell them what to do. Because I think that's how we best learn. And then Nick, actually, when he started the supervision course, offered me a space on the course, because he was still kind of testing the concept, and it was the first time he was running it. I think at that time it was the second time he was running it. So then I'm really glad that I added formal training to this, because through that, my approach to supervision that's integrated with coaching and training and mentoring and existential work really flourished, and through that training, the image was created of what rocket supervision is as a metaphor for coaches, trying to figure coaching out or lift off, get into orbit, change course. So it really grounded me in my approach. And I think everybody should have supervision, not just coaches. In my ideal world, everybody who works, and it's not just about work, everybody would have a space to regularly reflect on what they're doing in the world, right? I think every accountant, every teacher, every lawyer, every doctor, every kindergartner, I think everybody benefits from a space where they can reflect on their practice, and whether that's professional practice as a job, whether it's a freelancer, whether that's a father, a mom, a brother, a book club leader, anybody would benefit from that space. And it's all the same approach, in terms of how I see supervision. Normative, formative, restorative. If you create these spaces with these functions, then you're doing a really good job in the world. I think this makes the world a better place. It makes communities better places, families better places, workplaces better places. So I hope that supervision will take off so we can arrive in that ideal world at some point in the future.
Well, it certainly is in the coaching world, and I'm seeing more and more people using supervisors and training to be supervisors. So it's really interesting to hear your take on that. And that would be lovely, right? For teachers to be able to be supervised and to get that level of support, or managers.
Oh my God, teachers really need it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree on that point. So I'm just going to reflect back to you a bit of professional context. So for anyone listening can kind of get a bit of a picture of you. You're a coach, you're a trainer, you're a supervisor, you're a mentor. You've written a book on existential coaching. You host podcasts and you host spaces that support people and facilitating their thinking, whether that's talking about coaching or observing other people coach. Anything else that you'd add to the professional context of your output of coaching?
I think within coaching, that probably covers the basis. I've done a fair bit of mediation work, which I feel has a lot of overlapping skills. It's an alternative form of conflict resolution. And I really enjoyed it at the beginning of my coaching journey because it was very fast, and it was like, well, if this doesn't work, we're going to go to court. The conflict is going to escalate. So I really liked the heat and the motivation of people to take part in that process. And the process, it's a lot of coaching skills, right? You need to get to the heart of what this conflict is about. And that taught me a lot about coaching. Integration is a big theme, not just in my life, but also in coaching. Integrating different approaches to coaching, helping people integrate different ways of being in their coaching approach. Then also integrating coaching and therapy, coaching and counseling, coaching and mentoring, coaching and consulting. You mentioned a podcast in Coaching and Psychedelics. How can we integrate, bring things together, make them better through integration? That's been a big theme in my coaching world.
Are you interested in Ken Wilber?
Sorry?
Are you interested in Ken Wilber in terms of
Ken Wilber? Oh, yes, of course. There's no way around Ken Wilber when you look into integration.
Nice. Interesting you're talking about mediation, because one of my favorite podcasts that you did was with Monica Hanaway, and she's an existential coach who goes and does a lot of mediation coaching. So it just had me think of that and how that really relates to coaching. It's very much, an overlapping modality, right?
Yeah, Monica created the masters in existential coaching, and she also trained me in mediation. So I've been working quite closely from her. She started writing a lot. So her output the last couple of years has been fantastic to just share a lot of that stuff that was previously only accessible if you did a course or two. So anybody who's interested in the existential frame and lens and, into coaching or conflict resolution, she's a fellow multi-potentialite. She's done so many different things. She works in the music industry. She's worked with like gangs in Scotland. She's been coaching boards in, organizations. She's doing a lot. So interesting person to look into. Wow. Yeah, mediation has been a big part of her work.
I didn't realize she taught you. Is that the course that you did with Sasha?
Yes, that's right. It's Danny now. Danny van Derzen Smith. She's the daughter of Amy van Derzen, who's a big name in UK existentialism. I had the pleasure to spend a lot of time with her.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a bit of a picture now about your professional context. Vast question. I'm interested in who you are as a human being. And I understand the passion behind helping people and creating these spaces, but why is there a passion? What is it about you that has you show up and do this work?
Why is there a passion? So the first path that comes to me when I think about that is it's a strength part. Because from early on, like at some point I sat down and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? Because I have all these interests and they usually fade and something else becomes shiny and new and interesting. What can I do that is never going to get boring, right? Something that can capture me. And at that time, I'm son of a generation that was, you figure out that one thing you want to do for the rest of your life, and then you study that and choose that as a career. And that's terrifying, I think, for at least certainly for me, as someone who's like done this sport for a bit and then that sport for a bit and then hang out with those friends and then hang out with different people and always kind of bringing things together. So at the time after school, I did my social services, spent 6 months abroad, figuring out, well, what could that be? So, and I was fortunate enough to get in touch with my strength quite early on. So I knew I needed something that is new, something that is versatile. I knew I wanted to do something that is deep and meaningful. So long story short, I looked into psychology and I looked into therapy and counseling. And because I was looking for that kind of depth of relationship. So I kind of fell into positive psychology during my studying the mind, because I figured people are never going to get boring, right? They always change, they always evolve, they're always in the process of becoming. So coaching offers me the freedom within coaching to go in so many different places and so many different directions. I can choose to work with so many very different people in so many different contexts, all with the same skill set. And part of a job of a coach is to stay pretty aware yourself, because you're working in relation. That means you need to know what's going on for you. You need to keep a relatively clean mind. It doesn't mean that we're not struggling, but we need to be aware of what's going on for us and what are we struggling with. So we can park that when we're in a session, or we can use it for the benefit of the session. Right. So that always captured me. And the complexity of that work is just so capturing. Right. So the passion, where's that passion coming from? Because it's really aligned with my character strength. It's really aligned with what I find meaningful in the world, creating change, helping people to navigate really complex issues, making complex, convoluted things as simple as you can, right? Feeding things back, helping someone to make choices that they will find meaningful. And as I went beyond 30, there was also a shift that was less about me and, what would I find interesting or passionate, or what would help me enjoy my work. Beyond 30, I was thinking much, much more about what is the impact that I can have on people, on my communities, on the human community as a whole. So there was a lot of giving back since I turned 30. And so for the past decade, I really noticed that shift, giving me a lot of energy and a lot of passion, giving back, creating these spaces, having a positive impact in the world. It's really meaningful.
Mm. And perhaps I missed it, but when you was talking about character strength, what specifically are you talking about?
Mm-hmm. For example, appreciation and beauty, appreciation of beauty and excellence. I just really enjoy when things are really well done. I really enjoy when someone does something well. So spotting somebody using their strength is just marvelous, right? And it started with, like, for example, snowboarding. I have a lot of love for snowboarding just because you see people do things really well. And then another one is just generally having a positive outlook on the future. Hope. There's a natural tendency for me to look into a positive future. And that's really helpful. My dad's been a lawyer, for all my life. So I've learned to see the worst case scenario, and it helps to kind of integrate that. But yeah, that also, I do value autonomy a lot, right? So being able to do what I think is right and not being so bound by regulation really works well for the coaching industry. Really didn't turn me on so much when it comes to therapy and counseling, because especially in Germany, it's very, very regulated. So that drew me into the profession. Curiosity, big strength, right? I'm really curious. And also I like to be challenged, and I like to challenge. And that's a very positive thing, right? And culturally it can be kind of frowned upon. But I think it's hugely important when it comes to growth and development. And I am challenged like pretty much every session that I do with someone. There's something that challenges me that, helps me grow. So all of these kind of strength related to values, if you work aligned with what your strengths are, what your values are, it feels very authentic, and it's easy to get passionate about your job when it's aligned with who you are as a person.
Yeah, I'd certainly got that challenging viewpoint as well. I've noticed you've liked to challenge in a nice way as well, and I like that.
I try.
in conversations, in podcasts, or in dialogue or conversations on social media, you're good at asking questions that perhaps people might not want to ask or be afraid of asking, and that's an important part of coaching, right?
Yeah, and that's partly a skill, right? So Germans are, the stereotype is that we're very direct. And I've certainly noticed that when I moved to the UK in, what was it, 2005. It often felt rude when I was just being direct. So some translating had been going on. And now I have to adjust again, now that I'm back with lots of Germans, to learn that they actually appreciate if you just speak your mind, especially here in Berlin. Just tell me why you why are you beating around the bush? Why are you jumping around the topic? Why are we wasting time in this conversation? Just tell me what you think. And I think a lot of people appreciate that in coaching when it's already established that this person is on your side and that they want your best. It's much easier to challenge from that point of view. But yeah, there's, especially in the coaching lab, there's very, very experienced coaches, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have their insecurities. So, also they're my guest and I want to respect them and honor them. But I think you respect and honor someone by, challenging them. I felt I was not getting so much challenge anymore, especially from my British friends, or colleagues. From friends, yes, certainly we probably also choose them like that. But I think it's important. I think if you have a challenge for someone, it's a sign of respect when you are able to voice that in a way that's meant to be supportive. But you cannot always control how it's being perceived, how it's being taken. So, depending on what the cultural context is, and it is not just the country. Cultural context can mean a family or a workplace or a group of friends, then I like the spaces where the culture is one of embracing challenge as an opportunity to grow. But for some people, challenge means it's a criticism, and it's something that is negative. And I really don't see it that way at all. It can be difficult to hear, don't get me wrong, but I think it's always positive depending on how it's being integrated.
I completely agree. And it kind of makes me think about what you were saying around creating these spaces to further knowledge and learn, because ultimately, in a way, a challenge is a bit like that, isn't it? It's like, let's see if this holds up to the critique or the question. Let's see if we can find out some new information. And a challenge is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and ultimately, everybody needs to make up their own mind, especially in coaching. There's no one better way to coach than another. Sometimes the directive, making a suggestion, guiding someone through a process is exactly what that client needs and wants. Sometimes holding space for someone to figure something out, offering silence for the person to reflect more. Perhaps a question that is a prompt, but sometimes facilitating learning is what the client needs and wants. And not always the same. But yeah, creating spaces where we can be a bit more critical. I mean, that's how the coaching cabinet was created. You mentioned that peer support group. It was created because I wanted another space following the coaching lab when the coach and the client have left the room, I figured some people might be, well, that was pretty crap. I really disappointing. I really thought it was going to be much better, or someone would say, that was a really, really daring question. I mean, even that is very polite, right? If somebody says that was super leading, how come you asked such a leading question? And almost nobody asks that during the coaching lab. And when I ask that question, it sounds a lot less direct, right? But I think it's important that we ask that. So, initially I created the coaching cabinet for just a space without coach and client for us to talk about a bit more freely and a bit more openly, not being recorded, about whatever we find curious or maybe what we're critical about. Because I think being critical it's helping us grow so much. It's easy sometimes to see the coaches out there that we admire and then think that's how it's being done. That's how you are supposed to do it. And I've learned over the years that sometimes the objectively bad question, leading, closed, suggestive, is sometimes exactly what unlocks the client. So, yeah, it really, I don't think there is a better or worse in coaching. I think it's very, very context specific and always in relation to what has been agreed with the client. Not always what they want is what they need, but, you can have that conversation with the client and, agree on how you move forward. But there isn't generally a better way of coaching than another, as in terms of approaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Context is everything. Something I say is the devil's in the detail and the magic's in the application, and how we apply it and when and in what context can have different results depending on all the variables. So interesting to hear you talk about that. Nature or nurture then? You talked about your character strengths. You talked about your passion for coaching. Was anything to do with your formative years, or do you think you were born with this curiosity and these character strengths? Do you think that you're culturally from Germany is helping you with this challenge and this directness in coaching?
Oh, yeah, surely. Yeah, surely. I mean, I think it's always a mix from nature and nurture. At least that's, I mean, my education was evidence-based, right? So my way into psychology, my way into coaching has been greatly influenced by research. So when I've looked in my psychology degree into the nature-nurture debate, and I looked into, what happens when we study twins like monozygotic trims, so twins who share exactly the same DNA, if they happen to be separated at birth, and then later on you look at who they are and what traits they have and what characteristics, what character, then we find huge similarities that shouldn't really be there if, depending on where they've grown up. So I know, for me, that's a fact from the data that I've seen, and there's tons of data. You'd be surprised at how many twins were separated at birth. But it gives us a lot of data. So for me, it's clear there's a lot of nature, a lot that is in our genetic makeup. But there's also a huge amount in how we grow up. So yes, of course, if you've learned that being direct is an accepted thing and it's not frowned upon and you're not being shamed for it, then you're going to develop in a much more curious, outgoing, kind of explorative way. If you grow up and you're quite repressed, or you learn that if you're curious, then that's considered rude, or if you ask too many questions, that's frowned upon, or if you speak your mind, then you shouldn't be doing that because it makes people feel uncomfortable. And yes, of course, if a child comes to you and is like, "Why are you so fat?" It's not nice to hear, but also, they do ask that for a reason. Why did I? Well, my question, I did get that question the other day, and I'm like, well, because in the pandemic, I didn't do a lot of exercise and I decided to put priority on work and not my health, which is probably a good wake-up call. Thank you very much, you little. But yes, if you conditioned that way, then I think it's not impossible that you transcend that and that you make a change, that you create a new narrative for yourself. But it's easier when you had parents who were supporting that sort of behavior. So yeah, I got lucky. I'm very fortunate. I'm very grateful with how I grew up. not without my own, little traumas and, how I was, how certain stories were created. Everybody struggles. Everybody has their challenges. But I think I'd arguably had a lot less challenges than some of the people that I work with who really find it very difficult to let go of some of their stories and schemas.
Interesting to hear about you talk about your, I guess, background in academia, education, evidence-based work. And I guess that leads us nicely onto your business building journey. And you mentioned a little bit about what you've done previously before coaching, but if we were just going to chronologically track this briefly, what's led you to coaching? What were you doing before? What does it look like getting to the point where you decided to train as a coach?
Yeah, so for me, I considered myself very fortunate that, personal development was something that I could study right from university. So I didn't have the 9-to-5 job for a few decades before I developed into coaching. I did 6 months of music production in an audio school in Switzerland, just to see if because that was my other passion, right? Music, records, DJing, and but then I realized that's not going to be a job, and also I'm not sure if I want to do that as a job. The job always looks very different. So, but ever since I started studying psychology, and then, through that journey, there was always something that I could study that could deepen my knowledge and expertise and practice in coaching. So I was very close to just getting any HR job to build coaching work the traditional way, I guess. Build a professional network and then, try to do more coaching from that. But I guess I got a bit lucky. I got the right job at the right time, maybe a little late than I had hoped for. But I had a coaching related job at university. I had a teaching jobs here and there and, at various different universities now. I could always do some coaching related job until I made the coaching work. So that was super, super helpful. I never had the 9-to-5 in just any organization. I never worked in marketing relations, sales. Sales helps, to have certain backgrounds. But I just jumped into the practice of coaching and psychology, and that was always my career. So yeah, there wasn't much other than that, which I quite like, because 20 years ago it just wasn't an option. Nobody could study coaching at master's level; it just didn't exist.
So you've been in this world pretty much from your early education, or later education, shall we say? You studied a master's in coaching, and I think I've heard this story before when you mentioned you nearly got a job in HR, and it was at this cusp of that moment. And then things just started clicking for you in your business.
Yeah. So at that moment, it was an interesting moment because I had to look into marketing and sales and how do I actually build a business. And, at the time I was like, okay, so who could I talk to? What might be a niche? Who would be interested in the kind of coaching that I have to offer? And at the time, the best I could come up with was, people who are already taking care of their body. People who already have an intention to live healthy by going to the gym or doing yoga or going buy food in organic food shops or, so at the time I just created a very plain kind of flyers and some posters and talked to fitness studio owners whether I can hang something up and just trying to create relationships somewhere and kind of create visibility where people that I feel would also want a healthy mind. Right? It would be a natural next step from taking care of your body to taking care of yourself psychologically. But then before that could come to fruition, I got offered the job at the university. So I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have to do more marketing and sales, only to find that you'll never get around that. But it happened more organically then, at the time when I was like very close to just taking any job, I'm like, okay, I have to make this work. Because if I don't have to make this work, the alternative is to do any HR job. And I really wanted to continue to do what I like doing.
What? Just for my curiosity, what year was this? When did you do the first masters? I'm trying to figure out where we are now and when this was.
Yeah,
timeline.
This was 2012, 2013 that's when I started doing the first jobs for university. And then in 2015, I was offered the job to run the master's.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so it's been a 10-year journey for you then, in some respects, in terms of the start of the education to training and then developing the
exactly. Practice. Yeah, 2010, I started coaching as part of the MA in Existential Coaching. So I've known about coaching a year or two earlier during positive psychology. Because a lot of the research from positive psychology is used by coaches because it's all about optimal human functioning, and I have questions around happiness and growth and what's right with people. So I found out coaching exists, and then in 2010 I started properly training as a coach.
And I guess that wasn't really a strategic decision of yours to put yourself in academia and in these universities as a way. I mean, it gives you a lot of credibility straight off the bat, right? And I'm sure that feeds into your practice some way. I don't think you'd agree with that, but what I heard there was not that it was like a strategic decision. Oh, I want to get these jobs in these universities and it'll be part of my coaching aura. It was that you were super interested in that. And then as a result of that, you got offered jobs and roles within those institutions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the work with my first coach, I realized I had to give myself some more credit for what I've done, because up until that point, it just felt like everything just kind of happened to me, right? I was just kind of drifting along. At some point, I got introduced to the term dynamic drifter. And I thought that was so me, because a drifter traditionally is just someone who just kind of whatever happens, and you just don't really have any ambitions or goals or direction. You just kind of go with the flow of wherever life takes you. And for me, that wasn't like that. I knew positive psychology, coaching, personal development, conflict. People will always have problems or issues or goals or desires, so I knew that was going to be something. I knew that general direction is going to work out for me somehow. But I never made a 5-year plan. I never put a strategy into place. Occasionally I had strategies, but I never followed them for more than 5 minutes because I was just like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to say yes to this. So the campaign, Healthy Body, Healthy Mind, that was more strategic, right? Because I ran out of time and money and I really needed to make something happen. So now again, strategy is coming back because I think once you're working in an organization, once you're working with a team of people, which is basically what an organization is, you can't really get around setting some more concrete goals so that, people know what you're doing and you can communicate it clearly. And there's a space where you're going, and it's not just in my head. If I'm on my own, it's fine. I can go wherever I need to go. But yeah, initially, no strategy. That podcast wasn't a strategy. It was just like, oh, that was a really cool conversation. I'd like to have more of these conversations. Oh, people seem to enjoy these conversations. Let's just, publish more of these conversations. And then, oh, well, I don't want to do all the production stuff. So maybe I can get some people involved who would enjoy doing the editing and who would enjoy, getting some stuff out there. So yeah, all of that happened relatively organically, but with a direction. That's why dynamic drifting, and well, since children and marriage, there's more. What do I actually want, and where do I actually want to be, and which direction is this going into? So it became a bit more strategic, but I really never want to lose the passionate drive, because I realized I'm not very motivated by hitting milestones in a strategy. I'm motivated by the experience that it creates and the value that it creates for people and the impact that it creates. And strategy can help create that. That's why I'm much more friendly with strategy now, and I value it. But really, I try to keep enough space in my diary to do the things that I feel called to. And sometimes that means I love this project and I want to say yes to it. I'm going to be in a position in 2024, 25 to say yes to this. Can we please reconnect? Or, maybe I'll recommend you someone to talk to.
So now strategy is a bit more at play for you, thinking about goals and missions. Now you have your own organization, but back then it wasn't really about that. Like you say, it was about those experiences and adding value.
Yeah. So there was a point a couple of years ago, I think it must have been around 2018, 19, where I sat down and I thought, okay, I have all of these different strands of my business. I'm doing all of these different activities, and I'm finding myself doing a bunch of them not well. And I do value things being done well. And it got to a point where I just didn't have enough time in the week to do all of them well. And so someone I worked with at the time really encouraged me to look at, so where's your income coming from? Such basic business practice of like, well, let's put some categories on where your money is coming from, and then let's have a look at that. Oh, I see. Oh, so, a substantial part of my income is actually coming from the work with coaches. And I really love the work with coaches. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I guess that's a niche of mine. Coaches who are just starting out, but also coaches who are very experienced coaches. And then again, the niching bites me in the ass, right? It's like, well, it's new coaches who I do really good work with, but also it's very experienced coaches who I do really good work with. Both of this work I love doing, but I wouldn't want to choose one of them. So how can I create a niche that isn't limiting that kind of work? Because if I were to double down on my niche and get really specific, I could, but then it would get boring, right? Maybe not boring, but like I would want more. I wouldn't be happy. So try to keeping the niche open. One of the decisions I made at that time was, okay, let's focus like a substantial part of my marketing energy on the work with coaches. Okay, create events for coaches, offering more supervision, investing resources into creating a website that isn't just me and everything that I do, but create a website for coaches. rocketsupervision.com was created specifically for coaches. Yes, within that huge niche, people would tell me in order to be effective, you would really need to talk to a very specific kind of coach. But that's okay with me, right? I've always been having a broad range. And I think niching is not just the demographic you speak to. It can also be the problem that you're solving or the desire you're helping people fulfill. It can also be your particular approach, right? Rocket Supervision being the integration of coaching, mentoring, training, and deep existential work. That's not a given, right? That's not so common that you can cover all of these professional hats with one relationship. The existential lens, positive psychology, that's a niche in itself. And who I am as a person, what I put out there, how people resonate with me, that's also a niche. So I realized niching is not just, men in their 50s who work in insurance, female mothers, in their young mothers in their 20s with kids who've just moved into a different culture. Yes, that works. But in my experience, niching is becoming really important when you're the one who's speaking first. If you listen to somebody else first, then you can position whatever you have based on what they're telling you and what they need and what they want. So for me, not having a particular niche in that traditional way really worked. And yeah, I like what I've built, and it keeps working out. So yes, now with more strategy, part of my marketing energy is going to creating spaces for coaches and really investing in that, because I realized, well, that's stable. I can stabilize my income. Before it was like up and down and up and down. I had a great month here, and then nothing came in for 2-3 months, And with a family, you think, oh, well, maybe I don't want to live like that anymore. So when you think about how can I stabilize that more, that's where strategy comes back in. And in part, I had to sacrifice some of the autonomy and the just going with the flow. But I also think that's part of growing up. And if I do it in a way that I don't lose myself in it, that I can still stay true to myself, but on some occasions say, okay, actually a goal and a strategy is going to be really helpful for what I'm trying to do, for what the bigger goal is. That's been working quite well.
So interesting to hear you talk about the niching there, the distinction between that, I guess, super niche when we talk about, like you say, working with female mums with young children going into a new culture versus a slightly bigger niche with different hats, and then the niche of being you and showing up as you and doing those things? Because that's the question I've always been in about as well. Does it get a bit boring if you super niche down and you can't start thinking of all the people that you're going to lose out on? You don't want to lose out on them. And I guess that's the mental arithmetic you've been doing, and you've arrived at this process.
And I think it depends what kind of person you are and what you like, right? I know a bunch of coaches, they would really love a practice where they know their client base really well, where they feel I'm an expert in this field because, let's say, mindfulness-based stress reduction is my thing. And I know C-suite managers super well, especially in this industry, because I've worked in the industry for 30 years. That's you're showing up with a confidence that you can't possibly have, when you don't know anything. I love the not knowing. I love that. I think we sometimes ask much better questions if we don't know and make assumptions. But I know plenty of coaches who would love to know what's happening in this field, and then you can create a program and you can write about it, and you know what you're writing about, and you're offering a lot of value, and you can scale because you can train people in a particular approach. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is a fantastic example for it, right? It grew so big because you can actually scale it, because you can create an approach to help do that. You can measure it, you can research it, you can train the trainers, you can train other coaches to do what you're doing. And then you build a whole business based on that. That makes perfect sense. Just, I don't want to do it. Maybe someday there'll be how to build your coaching business a la Yannick in, existential coaching, business building. But there's a million different ways to build a business. There's 100,000 blueprints that you can follow that all are proven to work. But it really depends on who you are. Who you are is how you coach. Who you are is how you build a business, right? So some people build business just by having as many conversations in person as they can. And some build a business by figuring out how Google AdWords works, and then how to write an effective copy, and they test it and they look at the data. And then, I know a few coaches who have a machine that can turn leads on, turn leads off, invest 500 a month, get 10 leads. Invest 1,000, get 15. And out of those 15, how many do you convert? What's your process for consultation? What do you need to guide someone through to, for example, the guy I'm thinking about does happiness at work, and he figured out how it works and how it's successful, So I wouldn't want that. I mean, part of me would want that kind of machine, right? Figure it out, hit a switch, pay 500 or 1,000, and what comes back is a couple of grand. That's a working business model. But I'm sure you'll hear similar stories. No story is the same, but you'll hear similar stories over time. And for me, not sure if boring is the right word, but I would want other kind of clients as well. But that's me,
Lots resonating there. And what I took from that was that you were paying attention to who you are as a practitioner and a human being when you thought about that business building, or the niche, the non-niche, if you like. You like to be in uncertainty and not knowing. And in a sense, that is existential coaching, if I'm not wrong, right? Whereas some people, as a practitioner, they want to know. And that can be really, really attractive, can't it? To be the expert on ADHD. And then know that inside out and go into the space. And I think both can be useful, but then it's how you position yourself in the world as a coach to be able to attract different types of people, if that's what you want.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I totally get it, right? Because part of rocket supervision, there is the fuel tank. It's training, it's mentoring. It's somebody who's been doing it for a lot longer than you, sharing some experience and maybe sharing some suggestions, maybe pointing you in the direction of a book that might be helpful to read right now. I through that approach, I gave myself permission to put stuff that I have on the table and not always work in a purely facilitative way. I do think the learning is stronger when we offer spaces for people to think and reflect and come up with their own answers, but we do send our kids to school and we expect the teachers to put some knowledge on the table. and to point them in some directions, and not just say, what would you like to learn about today? And how would you like to approach that? So we do coach training. We read books, and in those books and in those trainings, they will tell us, here is this model, here's this theory, here is how grow coaching is done well. This is how you can do it well, and this is how we know that it's done well. So I think that part is important in the learning journey. So that's why it's not purely about this approach to learning is better than another, but depending on who's sitting in front of you, what is needed, what is wanted, what is going to be most helpful right now. Is it to share a piece of advice, or to offer a challenging question, maybe to offer a supportive statement, or maybe to ask a question to explore a little bit further? Heron's intervention styles, Eric DeHaan put them in a coaching behaviors questionnaire. Really helpful to figure out what is your style. And whatever your style is, you might have a modus operandi, you might have a style that you naturally gravitate towards, but you can learn as a coach to ask challenging questions, even though your natural tendency is to support rather than to challenge. So I think we can grow as practitioners. But if at the core, we're only doing the thing that resonates most with who we authentically are, then, that's the core part of your work. If you have nothing but that, then you're going to be doing good work. And if you learn to expand that, so you can respond to whatever the need is in front of you, you can move outside of that natural framework, and you can apply some skills, right? A car mechanic might be super passionate about fixing the 1969 Corvette, but they can also fix an exhaust pipe of a Opel Corsa, or Vauxhall is in the UK. Sometimes you just do a job rather than doing the thing that you're like super passionate about, and that's totally okay. Depends on what that person in front of you needs and wants. And that seems to be a theme that keeps coming back.
Yeah, and I really loved your chat with Julie Starr when she talked about going through the gears of reflecting, inquiry, noticing, naming, suggesting, telling. And it doesn't mean we're being a mentor when we're at that top end of the spectrum. It just means we're a coach doing that thing. And I love that take on that, and your take on it then. I've got a bit of a challenge for you then.
Great.
You work with coaches. I could say you are an expert in the field of coaching then. You're in academia, you're a trainer to be a coach, you're a trainer for supervision. So in a way, you are an expert in the field of coaching, and that expertise supports you in working with coaches, because coaches will gravitate towards you because of this aura of academia you have around you, who you are as a human being. But that knowledge must be seductive to some people, and for you to have when you're sitting with other coaches, whether it's the knowledge of not knowing or the knowledge of what other hats can I wear here. What do you say to that?
Oh, that's a very kind challenge. I get the challenge, right? And yes, it has helped me being often seen as an expert in the coaching field. I did get that more and more as I was more visible and more successful, that I had coaches who said quite openly during the consultation, well, you seem to run a successful business. I want to run a successful coaching business. So I wanted to talk to you rather than to someone else who seems less successful. So it's sometimes, it created a new challenge for me, which means I now have to work to level with them. Right? Because I think we're doing our best work when I'm not seen as somebody better or more successful or more knowledgeable, even though I've come across maybe a lot more knowledge in the field. But it doesn't mean that I know things, and I like that about Nick particularly. He really embodies this atmosphere of like, look, I just know what I know. It doesn't mean it's the truth. Right. And that's very phenomenological. I bracket what I think I can do. I give myself more permission now to just like what I would do in this situation, in a supervision call. For example, some of the groups really, really appreciated moments where I would share how I would formulate a challenge, or what alternative questions I can think of that might be less leading. So yes, I have that kind of experience, and I've come across a lot of different coaches who build their businesses in a lot of different ways and their practice in a lot of different ways. And I can put some of that on the table. But I would never assume, and I contract that quite clearly, that whatever I think or whatever I would do or whatever anybody else helped them to be successful, that's also going to help you, because who's in front of me might just be that coach who's longing to have the expertise and to scale a program and to create a 6-session intervention that is working in a very different way than I am. And if they try to do the kind of coaching that I do, they'd be unhappy. So I now have to work quite hard to make sure that I'm not being idolized in any way. But also at the same time, I'm happy to put stuff on the table. But it's always important that I'm very careful that we have an understanding that whatever I put on the table, whatever suggestions I might make with a new coach, whatever I would do if I were the coach is just something that can inspire some conversations or some reflections, and not necessarily what is best for you to do in any given situation.
Sorry, I was on mute. I feel like we could nerd out on this a bit more, and I'm just conscious of time. But making it collaborative, yes, yeah, it's so important. But I just don't see experienced coaches working with the coaches that are less experienced than them for obvious reasons.
Oh,
I've never seen that. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've had some coaches approach me that have been coaching 10, 15 years longer than I have, and they're taking, leadership teams on retreats and doing all of this stuff that I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do that work, but it's not the world that I'm coming from, but they understand what supervision is about. They understand what coaching is about. And if they understand that you don't need to be the expert, you just need to create a good space for them to think and to reflect. And that sometimes it's actually more valuable to have someone who doesn't know your space rather than someone who makes a lot of assumptions. It's actually helpful. There's been plenty of coaches where I was sitting in supervision. I'm like, oh my God, who am I to work with them? But quite quickly, usually I come to the conclusion that yes, trust the space you create, trust the process, right? And if they need someone else, they're going to go to someone else. And if they keep coming back, then you're doing good work. And if you're not sure whether you're doing good work, ask.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Thank you. Really interesting to hear about your experience of working with more experienced coaches.
Oh, sorry. I want to throw something else because I think it's a really important point that there's a lot of coaches who feel insecure for not having more experience. I don't think you need more experience, because what is the experience about? Anybody can hold space for someone. I almost never have more experience than that person. And by that, I mean that person has experience being them. I don't know what it's like to be you. I don't know what it's like to be my client in their particular context, with their particular approach to coaching, and with all of the skills that they're bringing from their previous years in wherever they were before coaching. I mean, there's so much that I don't have a clue about. So if you're just holding space and you hold space well, if you're being really present and you're not getting distracted by your own stuff and your own story and your own experiences and your own feelings, and you're able to kind of bracket what you need to bracket, to really tune in to who's sitting in front of you and being curious and being able to share and communicate what you're observing and any patterns, then that's going to be a really valuable space. And it really doesn't matter so much what your certificates are or how accredited you are or at what level or how many coaching hours you have. So create space, and if that space works for someone, then it works. So I see too many coaches putting way too much weight on their certificates, their proofs, the evidence that they are a good coach. More often than not, they bring a lot of transferable skills from having lived and having worked with people in whatever capacity. And that showing up with that kind of confidence that we're creating space here, and that's going to be helpful for you. And if it's not helpful to you, then let's have a conversation or let's not work together. I think there's a lot of value in showing up with that kind of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, it took me a while, also to show up with that kind of confidence. But I wish I could just transfer it in the minds of coaches, because so many times I see coaches do fantastic work. And then they come out of the session, they're like, oh yeah, all their story starts. But it was really good work and the client really loved it. Mm-hmm. But we have such strong critics in our heads.
Mm-hmm. It's a process of evolution, right? And I do agree with everything you say. I think there can be huge value when we know about the context, but I can also see there's huge value when we know nothing, because we can really be curious. We don't have anything to back it, right? And just being aware of that and what that's in the space. This is an interesting interview, I've got to say, because actually we've ended up talking a little bit more about theory and big picture stuff rather than the granular detail of building your coaching practice, which is fine. I found it really interesting. I'm just noticing time and I want to kind of wrap up a few loose ends. How are you for time? Do you have an extra 10?
I have an extra 20 if you want.
Right. Okay, well, let's keep going. So your business building journey, how did clients come to you then? Was it natural word of mouth process? You spoke about these flyers you made. Did you ever really do any traditional marketing or sales?
No, not. I mean, depends what you mean by traditional marketing, but a lot of it came very organic, right? A lot of the work with coaches was because I was training a lot. And then a lot of the work outside of that was because people started referring. I was on podcasts that were not necessarily aimed at coaches. I started talking about that. That was probably the biggest difference in my early practice. I started owning that I'm a coach and that I want to do this, and I started talking about it, right? So my social media was always free from politics and free from what I do professionally, because I felt, yeah, that doesn't really belong on Facebook, But then I realized what I do professionally is what I care about personally. And actually, it became a bigger and bigger and bigger part of what I'm passionate about. So, other than music or interesting, thought-provoking things, I started making coaching angles or positive psychology angles. Or when I come across something that was really interested from academia, I would talk about it. So people started knowing me more as someone who does coaching, and then later on somebody who is a coach, right? And then just learning to invite someone into a coaching consultation after a really, really good conversation, right? So you have a conversation wherever you might be, and lots of doors open where I'm thinking, oh, you would really benefit from coaching, right? And this could be somebody who's quite close to me, and the conversation wouldn't be, do you want to coach with me? The conversation would be, have you ever thought about coaching? Because there's so many doors open right now. I think you would really benefit from having, somewhat more structured and more formal conversations, and then they would ask questions, what do you mean coaching? Or they would say, oh yeah, but coaching isn't that the Tony Robbins stuff and it's all motivation, or whatever they say. You're then in a conversation, and you're in a different kind of conversation. And if it's someone that you don't feel too close to, you can offer them, hey, you know what? Why don't we have another conversation? It's similar to this one, just a bit more formal, a bit more in a bit more of a professional framework. We meet. What, are you free next Tuesday? Or next week or whatever. I'll block 2 hours for us, or I'll block an hour for us, or however much time you want to block. We'll have a conversation, and if you want to have more of these kind of conversations, I'll make you an offer at the end. How does that sound? I'm not going to charge you a thing. And it's very rare that if someone just had a really good conversation with some insights and some interesting direction, something they hadn't considered before, and it's, you're not charging them. That was a skill I needed to learn, to feel good about inviting somebody into a space, transitioning from just having a conversation to having a coaching conversation with an outlook to maybe paying for coaching, and just be more comfortable with offering your service for a fee. There's my money story that I had to work on. So yes, being open about what it is, what you do, becoming visible as a coach is important. Jumping is what many coaches refer to in noticed in supervision and coaching. Making the jump, making that post on LinkedIn, changing your description. That's a big step, but it's a super important step. And speak your mind, right? as I mentioned earlier, everything that you do is potentially inviting someone into a conversation with you. So that doesn't have to be strategic. For me, a lot of it was organic. But looking back, I'm like, yes, that's why it worked. Because people started building a relationship with me over, 6 weekends of training. And then obviously I'm the guy who they think of first when they think who might be my own supervisor or my own coach. The guy who told to me about coaching. If you show up regularly on social media, then you're building a relationship with people, whether you know that they exist or not. If you post regularly on Twitter and people start noticing you regularly and they like what you have to say, and you show up like you kind of reveal who you are as a person, what you believe in, whether that's professionally or personally, people build a relationship. So when then there's an opportunity to figure something out, you might be front of mind as the person who helps people figure something out. And yes, the more defined your niche is, the more easy it is to remember you. I struggled with that for a long time, and I decided not to go full niching. At some point I realized, existential coaching is a niche of mine, right? That's a thing. So, and it was also my thing. It really sits well. And the niche is huge. The demographic is terrible. People in the world with other people, but it did offer me something that people could remember me by. Yannick is an existential coach. It's probably saved in a lot of people's heads, even though I do so many more things, So yeah, being out there, following what you're passionate about so that you show up passionately, that's helped me. Getting like people that I spend a lot of time with, not being too afraid to offer your help. For me, it's not selling. Once it's flipped in my head, right? It's like I always felt I'm selling because I want something from people. But actually, I'm offering my help, and people get a lot more help than I get money, regardless of what I've charged ever. At the end of the year, my money is spent, and they still have the value from the transition they went through, or something that really stuck and made a huge difference. So that was really important to switch, that I'm not asking for money, I'm offering my help. That made it a lot easier for me. I think that's a couple of really key differences of how I got clients. Being out there, doing what I love, and then with a occasional strategic input of, I could make an offer now. I could post that I have availability in supervision groups because I've spent all this time showing up and building relationships, whether that was strategic or organic.
So interesting to hear you talk about owning being a coach and actually saying I'm a coach. That can be quite a barrier for many new coaches, right? To even say that in a conversation. Also, that point you made about the money spent at the end of the year, but the value someone has from coaching continues. That's really interesting one. I've never heard it before, but that kind of just sparked off a few thoughts in my head about,
that was huge. Building on that is also sit down at some point if you're listening to this and you're a coach. Sit down and calculate everything that you've invested in becoming a coach. And that's not just training, it's not just CPDs, it's not just your own coaching or your own supervision. It's also the time that you didn't earn any money doing something else. Because when I crunched the numbers, and I'm not a natural numbers person, but when I sat down and I calculated, well, in these, 6 years or 7 years that I've pursued coaching and personal development and spent all this time looking into philosophy and positive psychology, how much money would I have earned if I had become a consultant? Even not very good or passionate one, wow, that's huge. That's a huge amount of money that I not only spent, but also didn't earn on top of that. And I'm like, I need to charge a lot more than £50 an hour. This is not fair. Fairness is a big value of mine. And I'm like, I'm not treating myself very fair here. This is like I can't live off of that, and I don't live off of that, and I need to do other things. And if I need to do other things, I can't help people with what I'm naturally good at. So, that was a big step for me, a good reason. Math really helped me to put my prices up. Thank you, math.
that transition from putting your prices up and having those new lenses on your value, your time, the value that clients get. Oh, it's gone. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. It's back. Accessibility. Coaches want to help people that need help, right?
Yeah.
Something that pops up in my head, I always think about, I want it to be accessible for people though. And there are certain types of people I want to work with. How do you manage that? Maybe it's not a thought process for you.
Oh no, 100%.
I'd like to hear what you say about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, when Leah was born, I put my prices up 50%. And I'm like, I don't want to be that coach that you cannot afford, right? So at the time, what helped me a lot is that I have other places for coaches to learn with me or from me, right? Depending on what the format is. So at that point, I kept my prices for coaching the same. Coaching when I coach not coaches. So when I work with people who are not coaches, my prices stayed the same because there was no other service that I could offer them. And some people might care about that or not. It's okay to put a value on your time, right? And that's something I needed to learn. It's okay to regard my time as valuable. And if I regard my time as £500 an hour valuable, then that's my decision, right? That's not the price tag I have on my time. But like, if somebody were to decide an hour of my time is worth £1,000, then that should be their decision, right? And then somebody who wants to work with them either pays what that person regards their time as worthwhile or not. And then they look for someone else. So I think that's an important decision. When I worked with coaches, it was easier to put my prices up one-to-one because I have supervision groups. You don't have to pay one-to-one rates. Supervision groups are pretty affordable. I have the coaching lab, which is even more affordable. It's super cheap for what it is. I have the coaching cabinet, which is free. You can buy the book. I have tons and tons of podcasts out there that don't cost you a thing. So I felt that there's so much for coaches out there that I have a very good conscience in putting my prices up because, when you have children, your time becomes a lot more valuable and a lot more scarce. So, that might happen soon again. With coaching, I'm at a point where I could also do that just because my time feels a lot more valuable. Since we moved, it's been very, very little time, and I'd love to have some more time to explore the city. So I wrote a blog once about how do you calculate your prices, how much to charge for coaching. Talked about that a lot, and over a time, a list started with what I think should take into account when you charge. So how much did you invest, right? How much value are people taking away from it? How much does the coaching directly translate into monetary return on investment for their clients? What can you say without gagging, as a colleague of mine used to say? What can you say confidently, right? It's important. And some of these things we can train. We can practice saying a number confidently until it sounds confident, until it feels confident. It's possible. But yeah, being exclusive, I didn't want to be exclusive. I wanted to help people, but it really helps that you have other help available. So if you write a lot and you publish that for free, there's a lot of help that people have available. But if they want to work one-to-one with you, that comes at a cost. And another really important part for me was the price people pay me. Really, I don't regard it as money for me that's on my bank account. A lot of the fee that people pay is for them to be super committed to this process. Because the commitment that money creates, the investment, that commitment buys change, success. Money buys commitment, commitment buys whatever you want from this relationship. When I had two coaches in succession, one I paid about £60 an hour, and the other one I paid £500 an hour. Not an hour, a session. Sessions were longer, sometimes 2 hours, but like significant difference. The first one was a much better coach. The second one got me a lot more change, immediate change, because I was fully on it. I was preparing when I went there. I was reflecting on my way back. The other one's assistant had to chase me to book the next session in sometimes. So in a way, you're doing your clients a favor by putting your prices up, if they do come and pay it, because they might just look for another coach, which is fair. You also need to kind of look at, okay, who are the clients who can afford this, but I've had a client recently from somewhere in Asia where I thought, there's no way that this person signs up, and they did. I totally made a bunch of assumptions, just because the cost of living is less in the country doesn't, you'd be surprised at how much people want to work with you when you gave them a really good experience and they can see where this could go. Because ultimately you're selling a potential to become someone new or to change or to live different circumstances. You can't be certain, but you can sell a potential, and that commitment to helping somebody reach that kind of potential, it's really, really powerful. So yeah, those are some of the things that helped in terms of exclusivity and pricing.
Mm-hmm. All makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. And as you spoke about the money and the commitment that comes with it, I think it's so true, the psychology behind a commitment that one makes to work with a coach. And it's interesting because I'm thinking about Steve Hardison and what he charges, and he talks about, and I know you've come with him as well.
yeah, he didn't like me very much.
But something he said was very similar to you. Sometimes the work has already been done before they even get in the room, because they've had to save the money and be that committed and do some work to even get there. That they're so ready for change. It's just like a matchbox and a spark. It just goes off. So
and I noticed that certainly since the last pricing change, and also since I got a lot busier, since there's a waiting list, people decide to go coaching. Right. First, they book a consultation, and then sometimes it took a month or two until we could have the consultation. Then we decide to work together, and then it might take another couple of weeks. Or sometimes people say, okay, it's a lot. Let me tie up some loose ends so I can really focus on this, because, it is an investment. I want to make the best of it. And some clients have started 6 months later, so put a deposit in, committed, have a start date in January. And I've had a few people start in January, and they've also already done so much work, right? And I didn't do anything. We haven't had any sessions other than the consultation. And sometimes a lot happens in the consultation, but really committing to a journey and deciding on a start date, people do a lot of work, and that's wonderful, right? That's their work. And sometimes the thing already got resolved, and now what's the next thing? How amazing is that?
This does happen in consultation sometimes, doesn't it? The most important question, or the work can get done. I'm so conscious of time. I could keep going and going and going. Really interesting to hear about, I guess, the overarching themes of your business building journey, from the lenses around finance to creating clients through conversation and having that confidence I was taking away from that to invite someone in to working with you, and actually realizing that you're not selling someone anything, you're actually offering your service. So I'm taking a lot away from this conversation. I really, really appreciate it. We better wrap up. Before we do, a couple of questions. When you look back at your business building journey, what advice would you give yourself at the start?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to mind for some reason was, I wish I would have put more work in finding a decent VA and invest in that. Because there were so many things that I dreaded doing, and a lot of that really held me back in developing a more successful practice. And I know it can feel daunting, especially when the money is not quite coming in. I build everything quite organically, but I wish I would have invested in a good VA earlier than I did. And talk about it earlier. Owning what I do a bit earlier. I don't know. In the end, it's difficult looking back, because I think everybody's going their own journey. If I would give myself this advice as a time traveler, I'm pretty sure I would have done everything exactly as I would have done it anyway, because I'm like, I think we need to go through our emotions sometimes and, learn things the hard way. So I could give myself some advice. I'm not sure if I would take my own advice when I was 10 years younger.
Sorry, mute again. That's very interesting. I'm smiling a lot as well because I interviewed another person who would go by an existential coach who gave a very similar answer to you. So it's so interesting to hear you say about that. Lived experience is needed to arrive at these conclusions.
Speaks to the existential approach. I think that there's a lot less push and pressure to like succeed, make changes, drive things forward. A lot of it happens, right? And we pay attention to what's happening in front of us. I do believe that people can create change and we can accelerate that. For me, I wasn't the pushing for change kind of person. And I lived quite well like that. It felt quite organic, which is nice. But not everybody can afford that kind of patience.
Well, the context helps, right? A couple of quick fire questions before we wrap up. Any seminal books that were really important to you in your coaching development? What one pops up?
One that pops up is Reinhard Stelter's Third Generation Coaching. Really gave me a lot of permission to just to not drive the process, but really just stay with what's in front of you. It's quite existential at the core in many ways. But he also draws on a lot of research that helped a lot. And I really like Eric DeHaan's work. It's quite academic, but I really loved how his playing field opened up what coaching can be, and to be okay with coaching being quite versatile, and that the coach can be quite versatile, right? I mentioned challenging, supporting, exploring, suggesting. We can go all over the playing field depending on what's needed. That really made a big difference. And the book is called Relational Coaching, which I can recommend if you have some love for research and academia.
Thanks for that recommendation. I'm not going to ask you what your favorite podcast was because I think that's too difficult. But what was the one?
No, one pops up actually.
Oh, does it? Go on then.
Not one of mine, but one of the best episodes I've ever heard was Russell Brand and Brené Brown on Under the Skin. That was just such a wonderful conversation. It had everything. That was awesome. So anybody looking for a really good podcast episode, that would be the one.
I love that one too. I've listened to that maybe 30 or 40 times. It's saved in my phone. Yeah. What's not to like? Russell Brand, Brené Brown.
Well, depends. Yeah. Well, a lot of people really don't like Russell Brand. It's rare. It's more rare that you meet someone who really doesn't like Brené Brown. But
true. Yeah, he can be a bit Marmite, right? He has evolved as a person, and I think there's less Marmite around him. Anyway, what about the people you've interviewed? Have you ever come away from any of their interviews with your brain just blown wide open? Anything pop up for you?
Which one? The one that came to my mind was Nick and my conversation around his new thinking on transformative coaching. I'm not saying that because, we're talking about Animas here, but that's literally the first one that popped out for me. I mean, all of these were amazing. I usually have so much fun. But this one popped out for me because I really appreciated the thinking that has gone into based on existing theory, but really driving things forward, because I think often coaches can kind of stay where they are with coaching and just kind of come to terms with an approach and then kind of not so much digging deeper into the approach and what it means and challenging the approach and try to create something, bringing it forward. So I really liked that because it's building depth into what he's changing at the school, what he's been changing. And it was nice to see the thinking behind it. And it got me to think about what does transformation mean. And it's been a theme throughout the podcast. I had so many different ideas and perspectives on what transformation is.
Anyone listening who wants to listen to that, it's on our YouTube channel. It's in the first playlist and obviously on Coaches Uncaged podcast. It's a great one. So what's next for you, briefly? I know you've got to go. Anything in the pipeline, any plans?
Well, 2023 is all about broadening the sphere, right? I want to reach more coaches initially. And part of that is through scaling the coaching lab. And we have the systems in place now to scale. And so now it's going to be hopefully a lot of fun getting a lot of content out there so that we can get more visible and get more eyes on, what we offer to coaches and help more coaches be the best coaches they can be. And then from that on, branch out the marketing efforts into more existential spheres, hopefully get people to not have that many regrets in 20 years time, and do good coaching work, because I do believe coaches really change the world, small worlds, big worlds, and we certainly need some world changing, otherwise we're doomed.
So nice to be in conversation with you, Yannick, and really looking forward to seeing how that all develops for you. Where can people find you moving forward?
Yeah, so coaches probably best on rocketsupervision.com, and soon we'll launch gocoachinglab.com. And my main website is still existential.coach, where, anything around existential coaching, but also about a couple of other things I'm doing there. That's the hubs. I've got a YouTube channel that might be interesting. And if you're looking for the podcasts, talking about coaching and psychedelics, Coaching Uncaged, or write me an email, 42@existential.coach. Always love to hear from people.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Yannick. Wishing you all the best as you go about your day.
Thank you. Always nice to be in conversation with you, and the way you're listening is really mesmerizing. It brings out a lot. So I can see what's happening in your practice already. It's you have a natural ability to hold space for people to go talk and explore. So appreciate the space.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think I could have carried on going. We're at 140. We better wrap it up, and maybe we can do a sequel another day. But for now, all the best.
Thank you, Brinsley.